What's up, people? I'm back. Alright, so we've pretty much made our way through everything here in the integers world, and we're getting ready for a test. So, we're going to talk about everything today and go through some problems and practice problems and get you ready, because it's time to see if you know how to do this stuff. So, are you ready? We'll get back to the song here in a minute. Alright, so first thing we're going to talk about are these little things right here, where you've got a little number. First, say example, -18, and it's in those little bars right there. So that, of course, means absolute value, okay? And if you remember, absolute value is how far away it is from 0, or the distance it is from 0. So how far away is -18 from 0? You would just say that's 18. Alright? Or let's do one like this, where it's got a couple of them and maybe got to do a little adding problem or subtracting problem. So let's say we've got the absolute value of 10 minus the absolute value of -23. Alright, so the first question is, well, how far away is -10 from 0? And that, of course, is 10. And how far away is -9 down?
And 10 minus 23 is a problem you could do additive inverse on. Okay, that's what we learned when we did the subtraction stuff. So right here, you're going to do a little additive inverse. So that means I'm going to, of course, leave this one. I'm going to change that to a plus sign. And then that, I'm going to take the opposite of 23, which is -23. Okay, and then that takes us back to, hey, those have different signs. So when they got different signs, you actually subtract. And so I'd subtract that, and 23 minus 10 is 13. And then you got to say, okay, well, which one of those numbers is the bigger number? Is 10 bigger or 23 bigger? And 23 is bigger, so you got to take the sign of the bigger number, sign of the one that's got the bigger absolute value. So the actual right answer to that problem would be -13, okay? So the absolute value is 10, absolute value of that is 23. And then 10 minus 23, if I do additive inverse to that, 10 plus -23, actually subtract them and take the sign of the bigger number, and you got -13. So that's some of that, all right? Next thing, of course, is the last thing that we just talked about, which is yesterday's lesson, which of course is the coordinate system. And I'm just going to draw some stuff on here real quick just to refresh all that, because if you watched the lesson yesterday, that should still be pretty fresh in your head, okay? So this is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2, this is quadrant 3, this is quadrant 4. This little paste right here in the middle, 0, 0, that's the origin, the one running side to side horizontally. Of course, that's the x-axis. I'll put a little x over here. And the one running up and down vertically, that's the y-axis. That place in the middle right there, that's called the origin. First, before you go on the y-axis, so in the ordered pair, you always start at the origin. You want to go left or right on the x-axis first, then go up or down on the y. Alright, x comes before y. So, if they're in a quadrant, 1, 2, 3, or 4, if they're on the x-axis, you say x-axis. If it's on the y-axis, you say y-axis, that kind of stuff. So if I was going to do -4, -3, for example, and I was going to put a point B there, okay, I'd come over and go -1, 2, 3, 4 on the x-axis, and then I'd come down -1, 2, 3, and then I'd put my little B right there. Right, and that B is in quadrant 3. How about them apples? B is in quadrant 3. Okie dokie, so that's a little review of that. Now, one thing we haven't talked much about, as a matter of fact, I don't think we talked any about, is how to compare these and order these. So I'm going to spend a little time about comparing and ordering just for a minute, okay? So let's say we've got -7 versus -12, okay? And you got your little less than, greater than, equal to sign in there, right? Less than, greater than, equal to. Alright, so when you compare negative numbers, okay, the one that's closer to 0 is greater. The one that's further away from 0 is less. So if you're thinking about terms of temperature, that's a good way to think about it. Which one is the warmer temperature? That's the greater number, and the one that's the colder temperature is the one that's the less number. So if that was -7 degrees and that was -12 degrees, -7 is closer to 0, so it's warmer, so it would be greater than. So you want to have it open up to the greater than and point to the lesser than. Okay, -12 is going to be colder, so it's the one that's less. -7 is greater because it's closer to 0. Of course, if you had them on a number line and this was 0, okay, -7 would be like right here, and then -12 would be right here. And you can see that -7 is closer to 0 than -12, so it's the greater one. Okay. All right, so there's a little quick discussion about that. Then let's talk about putting some of them in order from least to greatest. All right, if I'm going to put them in order from least to greatest, let me give you a little set of numbers here to put in order from least to greatest. Let's go -17, 12, -5, 0, -23, 14, 16, and -30. Okay, so if I'm going to put those in order from least to greatest, okay, least to greatest. All right, I would start with the coldest number, which would be -30. And I'm going to scratch it. And then my next coldest number is -23, and I'm going to scratch it. And then my next coldest number would be -17. And then my next coldest number is -5. And then 0, of course, separates the positives and negatives. And then I would go 12, 14, 16. 12, 14, 16. All right, so you're going from least to greatest. Start with the coldest temperature, work your way up to the warmest temperature. So going from coldest to warmest, that would be least to greatest. Of course, if it said greatest to least, then you'd switch it around, and the 16 would come first, and the -30 would go at the end. So make sure you read these words on the test paper. Are you listening? On the paper, make sure you read and see if it says least to greatest or greatest to least. Okay? All right. So there's about halfway through. Hope you're doing okay. So don't forget, if you need my help with any of this, you can email me at dreid@davidson.k12.nc.us, or you can give me a call in here in my room, 336-475-8845, extension 2443. All right, real quick, we're going to go through all of our little things we've talked about here: add, subtract, multiply, divide, and hopefully that'll get us close to the end. So let's do one of these. It's got -12 plus 8 plus -14 plus -7 plus 13. Okay, so we got that kind of problem. Got some positives, some negatives. All right, just like I talked about before, I would take all of the negatives, which are these little jokers, and I'd add all them together. -12 plus -14 plus -7. So if I add those up, they've all got the same sign. -12 plus -14, -26 plus -7. That'd be -26 plus -7, -33, I believe would be right on that. Okay, then I'm going to take my positive numbers and I'm going to add them together. So 8 plus 13, that is 21. Okay, now, again, we get to here, just like we were talking about earlier, when they have different signs, this is the only time you subtract when they have different symbols. So here I'm going to subtract these. 33 take away 21 would be 12. And then you've got to say, okay, which one of these do I have more of? Which one's the bigger number? Do I have more negatives or do I have more positives? And since 33 is bigger than 21, we're going to take the negative sign, which means we'd have -12 left. Or another way to think about it is, maybe you owed your mama $33 and you paid her 21 back. That means you still owe her 12. Okay, still owe 12. we think about it in terms of real life stuff. All right, let's talk about a subtracting problem. All right, remember on subtracting problems, we're going to use that thing called additive inverse. And that means we're going to leave the first number, change it to addition, take the opposite of the second number. Okay, leave, change, opposite. Scoot this down just a hair so you can see it better. So let's say we've got one of these, negative 16 minus 25. All right, so if I do negative 16, I see that, and I'm like, ooh, that's a subtract problem, okay? That means I need to do additive inverse to that. So I'm going to leave that, change that to addition, take the opposite of that. So I'm going to leave that first number. That's going to be negative 16. Change that to addition, which would be plus. The opposite of 25 is negative 25. Now they're the same symbol. Negative 16 plus negative 25, I'm just going to add those together because they are the same sign. And that gives me negative 41. Okay, so there you go. Leave, change, opposite, using additive inverse. Let's say we've got one that's a combination, got add and subtract in it. Okay, like we've had on some of those other pages. Got a little add and subtract. So let's do this one. We'll come over here beside of it. Let's say we've got negative 8 plus 14 minus 27. Okay, so if I have that kind of problem, I'm going to do this first. Okay, that's addition. Don't change the addition. That's the only time you subtract because they got different signs. So 14 minus 8 is actually 6 minus 27. Now, I'm going to change that because that is a subtraction problem. And on subtraction problems, I'm going to do additive inverse. So that means leave, change, opposite. So that's 6. Change that to addition. Opposite of 27 is negative 27. Again, those are different signs. That's the time you subtract. So if I subtract those, that is going to be 21. And which one do I have more of? Is 6 a bigger number or is 27 a bigger number? 27 is definitely a bigger number, so you take the negative sign with that. Alright, we're heading into the home stretch, people. Remember, if they got different signs, you subtract them. If they got the same signs, you actually add them together. Okay, same signs add, different signs is when you actually subtract. Alright, that brings us to multiply and divide. Alright, on multiply and divide, they got the same rules. Okay, multiply and divide have same rules. Okay, so for example, positive times a positive is a positive, and a positive divided by a positive is a positive, and a negative times a negative is a positive, or a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Same rules. Okay, you could have a positive times a negative, or you could have a negative times a positive, and those both are going to give you the same answer. That's going to be a negative product. If you've got a positive divided by a negative, it's going to give you a negative quotient. If you got a negative divided by a positive, it's going to give you a negative quotient. Okay, so the multiply and divide rules, same. So let's just apply a couple of those real fast here just to review that. So let's say we've got this. We got 10, and then we got negative 5, and we got negative 3. Okay, there's no symbols there, so that's all multiply. So you can do it from left to right if you want to, or you can multiply the two negative ones together. I don't care
which way you do it, either way. I'm going to multiply the two negative ones together. Negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15. And then 10 times 15 would just be a total of 150. Okay, negative times negative gives you a positive. And then of course positive times positive gives you a positive. Okay. Alright, well let's try on this. let's say we got 3 times negative 10 divided by negative 5. So it's a little combo problem, okay? So up here I'm going to do 3 times negative 10, which is going to give me negative 30, okay? Because a positive times a negative is a negative. Then I'm going to take that negative 30 and divide it by negative 5, and a negative divided by negative is going to be a positive. Okay, a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so that is going to be a quotient of positive 6. And then the last thing I want to talk about is if they've got the little variables on the end. So let's say we've got negative 3x and negative 11y. Okay, you're going to multiply the two of those numbers together, and then you're going to tag the variables on the end. Okay, so a negative times a negative is a positive. So negative 3 times negative 11 is positive 33. Okay, and then you just tag the xy part on the end, just like that. So it'd be 33xy. I said that was the last thing, but that's really not the last thing. One final thing is average. And if you remember, for average, it's 2 steps. You got to get the sum of the data, and then the second step is divide by how many numbers there are in the data. So divide by total number of data. All right. So add them all up, divide by how many there are. So let's just say we've got this problem, for example. We got negative 17, 14, negative 6, negative 1, 9, and 7. Alright, just like we talked about earlier, I'm going to take these negative numbers and I'm going to add those together first. So negative 17 plus negative 6 plus negative 1, that is going to give me negative 24. Alright, then I'm going to take my positive numbers there. I'm going to add them up. 14 plus 9 plus 7. So that is 14 plus, this way, so 16 plus 14, 30. Okay. Alright. And then back to what we talked about. This is the only time you really subtract, is when you got different signs. Okay. So 30 minus 24 is what that problem is, which is a total of 6. Now, we've got the sum of the data. It's 6. How many numbers do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, well, that's easy enough. 6 divided by 6 is a quotient of 1. So that pretty much covers it, people. That's about as fast as I can do it. If you got more questions that you want to ask me, feel free to ask me. Okay, I'm just a phone call away. So give it your best shot this week. See if we can't make some good grades on this stuff. If you know this song and you'd like to get a little extra credit for the test, hit me up with the name of the artist and the title of this song. So, artist and title of this song right here. And I hope you're doing well. Stay healthy, study up, and hope you do good on the test. Until then, adios, sayonara, and arrivederci. This is Mr. Reid, over and out.